Hey, my beautiful people. I wanted to say hi, and I'm hoping you our guys are having a great day. Let's go ahead and continue on in the book of Genesis. We are now on chapter 6. And chapter 6 talks about man's wickedness, and also God calls Noah. So basically the wickedness of man in the days of Noah. And just to remind you guys, I got my Bible over here, I got my notes over here, so I will be looking back and forth if you're wondering what I'm doing or reading from. So let's continue on. The first and second verse talks about the intermarriage between the sons of God and the daughters of man. And the first two verses say, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." Now, during these days of rapid population, because of long lifespans in the pre-flood stage, there was a problem with ungodly intermarriage between the sons of God and the daughters of men. And it is more accurate to see that the sons of God's as either demons, which are angels in rebellions against God, or uniquely demon-possessed men, and the daughters of men as human women. The phrase sons of God clearly refers to angelic creatures. It's also referenced in the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 6, and chapter 38, verse 7. We can also reference it to Jude chapter 6 and Jude chapter 7. We can also reference it to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 19 and 20, and also reference it to the book of Matthew chapter 22, verse 30. And when it says they took wives for themselves in verse 2, that basically means that Satan tried to pollute the genetic pool of mankind with a satanic corruption. All right, so verse 3 and verse 4, the next two verses talks about God's response to the great wickedness that happened, which I have not yet, well, I started to read the book of Enoch, and I'm not very far into it yet, but I'm working on it. It's pretty interesting. All right, so verse 3 and 4, and it says, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that if he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And verse 4, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, and same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." Now, verse 4, we'll get into that in a minute. Let's start with verse 3, where it talks about, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever." So basically that means that God did not allow the human race to stay in this rebellious place forever. Okay? This means there is a point of no return in our rejection of God. God will not woo us forever. Okay? There is a time limit. His days will be numbered 120 years. So this announcement was about the time left until the judgment of the flood. Okay? The flood happened 120 years after this announcement was made. So leading up to this point, pre-flood, this was all pre-flood, leading up to this point. Now, verse 4, when it talks about giant on the earth, there's a couple things that I see as well. So, number one, there were giants. And number 2, if you remember in the first couple of verses in the Bible, or chapters in the Bible, it does, or in the book of Genesis, it talks where it says, "When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men," that means they lay with them and they had babies. So the giants of the earth refers to the unnatural offspring of the union between the sons of God and daughters of men. Though there were people of unusual size on the earth, both before and after the flood. These ones before the flood were unique because of the demonic element of their parentage, which is very interesting. All right, next is verse 5 through 8, and these verses are about great wickedness of the man in Noah's day. And verse 5 through 8 says, "And God saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping things, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me, and I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." So in verse 5, where it talks about every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So basically what that means is, that verse alone says a lot, okay? And it means that there was no aspect of man's nature not corrupted by sin. Okay, let me say that again. This means there was no aspect of man's nature not corrupted by sin. Okay? Jesus said, as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man be. That is Matthew chapter 24, verse 37. In other words, the condition of the world before the coming of Jesus will be like the conditions of the world before the flood. We've got exploiting population, which is in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. We've got sexual perversion, verse 2. Demonic activity, verse 2. Constant evil in the hearts of man, verse 5. And widespread corruption and violence, verse 11. And verse 6, when it talks about the Lord was sorry that he had made man. Now, God's sorry at man and the grief in his heart are striking, okay? This does not mean that God hoped for something better, but was unable to achieve it. God knew all along that this was how things would turn out. But our text clearly tells us that as God sees his plan for the ages unfold, it affects him because he's God and he has a heart. And in verse 8, when it talks about Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So while God commanded all the earth to be cleansed of this population, he found one man with whom he begin again, and that was Noah. He didn't earn grace, he found it. There's a difference. No one earns grace, but we can all find it. We can also reference that to Romans chapter 5, verse 20. All right, next two verses is verse 9 and 10. And this talks about how God calls Noah to build the ark, and about Noah and his sons. And 9 and 10 say, "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was just a man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons." Begat means bore. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right, so this description in verse 9 not only refers to the righteous life of Noah, but also the fact that he was uncorrupted by Satan's attempt to sow something like a virus among the genetic pool of mankind. And so Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And next is verse 11 through 13. And 11 through 13 talks about the corruption of the earth and the grace of God. And 11 through 13 says, the earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And so basically, since Genesis chapter 3, because we're in chapter 6, every human had a death sentence, or has a death sentence. The timing and method are completely in the hands of God. So let's continue on to verse 14 through 16. And these verses is about how God tells Noah to build the ark. So verse 14 through 16 says, make an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shall thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. And pitch is like tar to waterproof the wood. So that's what pitch is. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And we'll talk about these verses. So verse 14, when he says make thee yourself, meaning yourself. So that means that's Noah's project alone. He built that. Not contracted out to someone else, but he did that. The ark is made of gopher wood with rooms inside the ark. And when he, in verse 15, where he talks about this is how you should make it. So let's break it down a little bit. So the length is 300 cubits, okay? That is as long as a 30-story building is high, okay? That's how long it is, a 30-story building. The width of it is 50 cubits, and that's about 75 feet. And the height is 30 cubits, which is about 40 feet or 45 feet high. This is more than a boat, okay? It's a barge, well ventilated, only to float, not sail, anywhere. After all, an ark is like a chest, not a ship. It had a cubic wide opening, which is 18 inches, all the way around the top. That was very interesting. And in verse 16, when he said, you shall make it. Well, God had not yet told Noah why he must build the ark. All Noah knew was that God will judge the earth, and he was to build a large barge. And Noah did make it. There's also historical evidence. Number one, this darn fly. In 275 BC, Berosus and a Babylon historian wrote, but of the ship that grounded in Armenia, some part still remains in the mountains. Number two, around 75 AD, Josephus said that the locals collected relics from the ark and showed them off to this very day. Number three, in 180 AD, I get this name wrong every time, Theophilus of Antioch wrote, the remains are to this day to be seen in the mountains. Number four, an elderly Armenian man in America said that when he was a boy, he visited the ark with his father, and three aesthetics scientists in 1856. Their goal was to disprove the ark's existence, but they found it and became so enraged they tried to destroy it, but could not because it was too big and had been petrified. In 1918, one of the scientists, an Englishman, admitted on his deathbed the whole story was true. And number 5, in 1876, a British statesman and author, Viscount James Bryce, climbed Ararat, I can't ever say that name, and reported finding a 4-foot-long piece of hand-tooled timber at an altitude of more than 13,000 feet. Number 6, 6 Turkish soldiers claimed to see the Ark in 1916. Number 7, in 1936, a young British archaeologist hiked across Ararat, I can't ever say that name, and discovered interlocking hand-tooled timbers at a height of 14,000 feet. Number 8, a Russian aviator claimed the discovery of the Ark. He was stationed in southern Russia near the Turkish border in Mount Ararat, however you say it, as he tested the plane, and he and his co-pilot flew over Ararat and discovered on the edge of a glacier what he described as a boat the size of a battleship. He said it was partially submerged in a lake, and he could see there was an opening for a door nearly 20 feet square, but the door was missing. He told his officer, and an expedition was dispatched to find and photograph it. The report was forwarded to Tsar, who was soon overthrown, and it all perished. And last but not least, number 9. 2 World War II pilots saw and photographed something they believed was the Ark on Mount Ararat. So back to verse 14, when it talks about cover it inside and outside with pitch. So pitch worked to waterproof the wood, which makes it possible that the Ark was preserved for a long time. Also, maybe God has a purpose still to use it to remind the world of a past judgment shortly before the future judgment. And we can reference that to 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 1 through 7. Next is verse 17 through 21. And this talks about why the ark must be built and what Noah must do. And basically, I'm going to read the verses, but it's self-explanatory. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment. So verse 17 through 21 says, And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort, thou shalt bring unto the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So basically that's self-explanatory. And but because Noah found grace with God, him, his wife, his 3 sons, and the 3 sons' wives. I'm not sure if they already had wives or if they had to go out and find a wife. I'm not sure because it doesn't say. Like I said, we're not meant to know everything. All right. Last verse of chapter 6 is verse 22, and it says, Thus did Noah. This is also, this verse is about Noah's obedience. So verse 22 says, Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. So these words, so did he, covers a lot of material and years. Yet Noah did not shrink from what God told him to do. Because mind you, how long it took, which I'm not 100% sure, I'm sure it's in here somewhere. If not, I'll research it because I did forget to research it up, of how long it took to work on the ark and build it. Noah was a great hero of God. He was an outstanding example of righteousness. That's also referenced in Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 14. He was a preacher of righteousness, which you can reference that to 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. And Noah condemned the world by offering salvation in the ark that the whole world rejected. And you can reference that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. But can you imagine that the whole world rejected him? I mean, look at how things are today. And how they mock God, they don't believe God. It's just as bad. And I'm telling you, I do believe we are living in the last days. All right, guys, so that's the end of chapter 6. I hope you have a great evening. I may do one more chapter today, maybe. All right, well, you guys enjoy. Thanks, guys.